I'm a little nervous.
Welcome to Embracing the Bold Radio Hour, where we explore the vibrant arts, entertainment, and design scene right here at Valencia College. Join us as we chat with students, faculty, and artists about their journeys, inspirations, and professional experiences. Each episode unveils the creative pulse of our campus, offering insights into the world of artistry and education. Let's delve into the heart of creativity together right here on Embracing the Bold. We're so glad you joined us today, and I'm your host, Rebecca Lane. Hi, folks. Welcome. And today we're going to learn a little bit more about our graphic design program, and we'll learn about it from two folks who are deeply involved in the program. I think you're going to enjoy the conversation. Before we get started, I just want to remind you we have an amazing art season coming up. First, we have an art show. We've shifted from the artist Vince Sansone, and we've shifted to a new artist named Leo. But I'm looking forward to seeing the show. I think it's going to be fantastic. That opens on September 19th. We also have a musical coming up on October 17th that is Return to the Forbidden Planet. And then we have our annual symphonic jazz band Halloween concert coming up on October 31st. So we are rushing into the fall season with some fantastic entertainment opportunities, and we're looking forward to seeing you. So today, we have two guests, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves. So I'm going to ask you guys to say your name, and what your role is at Valencia College, and what your focus is within the graphic design program. Do you want to go first, Emmanuel?
Yeah, hi, I'm Manuel Sorio. I am a graphic design laboratory aide at East Campus. I focus in interactive design and web development.
Awesome. And are you a student as well?
Yes, I am. I am an interactive design student and also a software development student.
Oh, that's great. Okay. And Alex?
I'm Alex Malik. I'm also an East Campus laboratory aide. I am also a graphic design student doing print specialization. And was there another question that you had asked?
Just what's your name? What do you do here at Valencia College, and what's your discipline focus?
Yeah, I think I got all of those.
I think you did. Cool. So thank you for joining us on Embracing the Bold. The goal here is to help students and their parents kind of learn what it's like to be at Valencia College and what it's like to be a part of the program that you participate in. So the first question I have for both of you is how did you find graphic design? So why graphic design of all of the majors you could choose from? How did you get the bug?
For me personally, I didn't even want to be a graphic designer at first. I actually wanted to be a photographer. But 12 years ago when I was in high school, I found a digital design class, and there we learned Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign. And just 4 years of that, when I got into college with Valencia, that's when I joined the graphic design program.
Okay. So how did you decide that you liked graphic, like how did you make the shift from photography? Like what was exciting?
Yeah, so when I was taking those first few years of the design class, I had thought that we would learn photography. We never did. It never.
Oh no.
We had there was like one assignment where we took pictures of it and then we photoshopped them with like special effects. But there was a point where I missed the class, so I had to learn on my own, and I found a lot of tutorials on YouTube, and I learned how to use the Photoshop software and started making some like logos in Photoshop, which I know now you shouldn't be making logos in Photoshop, but at the time I was like, wow, this is amazing. I made that. And from there, I just kept going in and trying to learn new things.
So you found graphic design accidentally when you were actually trying to learn photography.
Yeah.
That's great. Was that a class that you were taking at a college? Was that a high school class?
It was at a high school.
Okay.
Yeah, so I knew for a while that I wanted to go into like something creative.
Okay.
It's just shifted from photography to graphic design to now web development. So.
Okay. And Alex, how did you find graphic design?
Mine is kind of a weird roundabout story as well. So I had always wanted to be in the yearbook club at my high school, and I finally got in my senior year. And concurrently that semester, I was taking an additional class. It was actually driver's ed, but we shared the classroom with a Photoshop class. And because of a medical reason, I couldn't take the driver's ed class anymore, and I switched to the Photoshop class. Um, and I just remember being really interested in the stuff that we were doing, making like photo manipulation edits. And after the class ended, I found myself doing it more like in my free time, designing stuff for my friends and whatever. But it was really yearbook that made me think about it in more of a design sense. So like I used the software in that Photoshop class, but started designing like multi-page layouts, and I didn't truly understand it like I do now. But I just happened to kind of like step my way in. And then when I graduated high school, I didn't know what I wanted to major in. I decided to go to Valencia because it was affordable. And there was one nearby where I was living at the time. And actually, I was going to build my portfolio and apply to an art school in Sarasota's Ringling. So my first semester at Valencia, I was taking a bunch of art classes, and I decided, okay, I'll take graphic design essentials since I took that Photoshop class and I liked it. So it was really just like an elective that I took it as. And then I found myself enjoying what we were doing. My professor at the time, Jason Ellison, who's still in the program, basically advised me to stick with it and see if I could do it on the side as I went to art school. And I kind of like dismissed that at the time. I was like, oh, whatever, I'll just go what I'm gonna do. But then that ended up falling through, and I was like, you know what? I like the professors here. They're really great, really supportive. And I like what I'm doing so far. I kind of want to see where this goes. And so I switched majors into graphic design, and I just started doing it full time from then on in like 2019.
So you switched from being a fine art major to a
Ew.
graphic design major?
I think I was an undeclared major at the time, so I
But
didn't
in
even
your
have a major.
but you talked about going to Ringling. So
Yeah,
in your head, were you a fine arts major?
I was going to go to Ringling for game design,
Oh, okay.
but I don't think that that would have worked out for me. Just thinking about it now, I probably would have liked doing the UI, like the user interface of like, here's the game menus and stuff like that. So I think my brain knew that I wanted to do this before I knew that I wanted to do it. Kind of like Manuel, I also wanted to go into the creative field because I come from like a family of artists.
Okay. So I hear uh, one of the things I hear when I speak to folks in the graphic design program is that graphic design is very different from fine art. So what's the same and what's different from like if you're involved in fine art, you're involved in graphic design. What's similar and where do the differences happen?
Yeah, I
Mm.
find that graphic design has aspects where you work with shapes, colors, lighting, depending on what you're doing, really. But it really does vary because it's more of communications than anything, where you are trying to communicate some type of message to to a consumer or to like anyone that's like looking at something you made. Like if you had like a poster that said, "Hey, we have this event going on." So the main goal behind graphic design, personally to me, is communicating a message. It can have art aspects to it, like someone you can make a poster of an illustration or make an illustration for a magazine cover and things like that. But I think that that's kind of how it varies for me, at least for me.
Okay,
That's
so
true.
it's message oriented,
Yeah.
but message through art,
Yeah.
as opposed to fine art, which is focused on what?
Maybe Alex could answer that since you were, you did more fine arts.
Yes. I was going to say, in a similar vein, yes, you do think about like forms in terms of shapes. You think about color theory, um, and like somewhat the aesthetics. I mean, I'm not really a fine artist, but I would say my experience with fine art is more of it involves technique in a different way that design. needs. Like design is more software knowledge and knowing how to utilize things from fine art into, like Manuel was saying, communicating a message. Um, they always say like form follows function.
Hmm.
So you want the functionality of the design to matter more than the way that it looks. Though obviously the way that it looks is something we take into consideration because that's what we do. But I do have to say art is more subjective and allowed to be a little bit less functional, I guess. Like it doesn't have to serve a purpose when you're doing fine art. I mean, I'm sure some people could argue otherwise, but like when you go to a museum, I'm sure you're not thinking like, oh, what is the message? Like, what am I supposed to be understanding as a consumer from this sculpture or this banana taped onto the wall? If you've seen that, like, like I don't there's a lot more intentionality, I feel like, because we are working with businesses and working with groups of people who need us to convey something through the art versus just making the art.
Okay.
Yeah, and I also think that graphic design, there's like a certain structure to how you have to lay things out. Um, like we a lot of times follow a grid, which I'm sure in like fine art you also do use like a grid for drawing things,
Hmm.
but it's in a very like structured way where we want things laid out in a certain way so it communicates a certain type of hierarchy. And based on that hierarchy, people would read a message differently if it's like written design versus something that's like illustrated or drawn.
Okay. So, so why did you guys choose Valencia? Of all the places you could go, why did you why did you choose to go here?
I know for me, it was kind of recommended to me by someone who went to Valencia as like, this is more affordable for you. So I obviously didn't come from like a lot of money, so affordability was a big factor. But I think the accessibility of how many campuses we have now, like across Orlando and Central Florida, as well as when I did get into the actual classes, I think the class size was a big factor for me. That was like my main thing as to why I didn't want to go to like UCF or, eventually down the line Ringling, because I really wanted to feel like my professors knew me and I wasn't just another like one out of 200 people in a lecture hall where if I needed to ask a question, like it would take until the end of the class where I'd have to wait. So I feel that level of connection is really important to me because at the end of the day, what made me want to go into the major were the professors.
So you ended up going into graphic design as a major because you connected with the faculty?
Yes, I used to take the bus to East Campus and I would be there like sometimes 30, 40 minutes before class would start, and I would just hang out in the lab that Manuel and I both work at. And I would talk to my professors and have them review my work and stuff. I felt like that connection was really nice. So
That's really great, Alex. Manuel, what about you? Why did you choose Valencia College?
So for me, it was there's various reasons. At first I didn't even know that Valencia offered a graphic design program, so I was using Valencia more of a way to get into like UCF or another like 4 year university that offered a graphic design program. And that's only because like I did not. I was like school is something I always struggled with, between ADHD and a whole bunch of different things. I was never able to get good enough grades to have a high GPA for like UCF, for example. So I was like, oh, Valencia has the direct connect, so I can transfer over to UCF. They have a graphic design program. But once, like, I've had a few tours here as Valencia Osceola campus as well by that point. And like every time I was there, I'm like, wow, this actually feels like somewhere I can go to school in. But for me, what made me stick with Valencia is like after I was like, and after I enrolled to the college, when we had the orientation, I found out there was a graphic design program. So I joined the graphic design program. And at the time, I still was like, I don't know what I want to do. I'm going to join this program, but I'm also going to do general studies. So I was dual major. Um, So I was able to take my general courses with the graphic design courses at the same time. And because of that, like I was able to afford having like the equivalent of like going to UCF for graphic design. And it was actually like great. And I also used the graphic design program as a way to learn on my own as well.
Okay, so you were here before you knew we had graphic design. Like you
Yeah.
knew you wanted to do graphic design,
Yeah.
but you didn't even know that we offered it. You were just getting your AA out of the way.
Yeah, that's what I initially wanted to do. But once I had orientation, I found that there was graphic design, so I so enrolled for that.
That's awesome. So you were doing your AS, your Associate of Science, and your Associate of Arts at the same time?
Yeah.
Okay. That's really cool. What was that like?
There was a lot of just having to meet with my advisors and like, I was meeting with Roxana in Osceola and she was great. She gave me all the information I needed for that. But it was a lot of trying to figure out what classes I needed to be taking and how to balance two majors at the same time. Because typically with a Valencia major, you would do like 64 credits. I was doing about 90 in total.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
Okay.
I wanted to make sure I was balancing everything and make sure that I had enough, like I could take enough classes for my financial aid. So I was doing like two graphics, two general classes at the same time each semester. That way I can get the full 12 every semester.
Right. So are you guys both full-time students or are you working and part-time students? Like how are you organizing work and student life and classes and all of that?
I used to be a full-time student before I started working here. During 2020, I had to take a break from my classes just because of everything that was going on. But when I started working at Valencia, I was like two classes away from the graphics to graduating. I joined a different degree program, and I just started doing like one or two classes at a time, so just part-time student. But now I'm at the end of all of that. This is my last semester, and
Congratulations.
yeah, thank you. It's there's I there's been times where I've like these past like this past year really that I've just been like full stress just because of the workload between my classes and working here at the same time. But it's been like a good type of stress. Like at the moment when it's happening, it's like that's all I see, and I'm like I don't know what to do. But after I finished that semester, I'm like, wow, I actually learned a lot this semester, and I see how I improved. And I was like, you know what, that stress wasn't as bad as I thought it was.
So you've got stress, but you're learning
Yeah.
you're learning through the stress.
Yeah, a lot of it is learning how to like manage your own time and juggle between. For me, it was juggling between Valencia, so working and studying, plus doing some freelance work at the side.
Oh, that's great. So you are working for Valencia and you're taking classes and you're doing freelance.
Yeah, I was for the past year I've been doing some web development freelance work.
And is that using the skills that you've learned here?
Yeah, a lot of it is things I've learned here, and the things that I didn't know, like working with WordPress, I knew enough from my classes here that I was able to adapt easily to learning different tools outside of what we learned.
Oh, that's great. So, Alex, what about you? What is your student work balance scenario?
I actually have a very similar story to Manuel, where in 2019 I was a full-time student. I was about halfway into my degree and then COVID happened. So summer of 2020, I stopped taking classes because I had to start working full time, basically. And I wasn't able to start up my classes again until January of this year. And I had to do it part time. So I'm a part time student right now, and I work part time at the lab. But part time, I say loosely because I'm basically taking three classes every semester, and it's one class away from being full time. Um, but I have two classes left. I'm in my last semester as well, so graduating at the end of the year.
Congratulations.
I agree that it's stressful at times, like with the stress of how heavy the project load is, because we're an AS degree, and they always talk about how they want to get you ready for the workforce. And part of that, sorry, my dryer's going off in the background. Part of that is making portfolio pieces so that by the time you graduate, you have a portfolio that's competitive for the industry. So that at times can be really stressful to balance the responsibilities and commitments of working and also making sure that I'm putting out the best possible work that I can. Um, but I agree that I've learned a lot this semester. I haven't had the pleasure of freelancing because I've applied and no one has offered me anything yet. But currently doing internship with Valencia through our design studio class. So hopefully we'll be getting the experience of working on some projects that aren't related to my classwork.
Okay. I mean, that sounds like a great journey. Like going and your experience is similar to a lot of folks, right? Like full-time pre-pandemic and then the pandemic just threw a wrench in everybody's lives and plans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
COVID.
Woohoo. Um, but now you are working and you're part-timing all of the things. So what, and this is for both of you, what do you love about graphic design? Like what really gets you excited about a project?
I think the creativity, being able to think creatively and utilize those artistic like sensibilities in my work. Like I was saying before, the break that I took, I worked in a lot of different fields, like food service, customer service. I did transcription. I was in the legal field. I did financial transcription. Like I did a lot of different things. And all throughout those 4 years, all I could think about was, wow, I want to go back to school and get my degree. Like I knew that I wanted to do graphic design after I had taken those classes. I knew that that's what I wanted to spend the rest of my life doing and dedicate my time to. So that's kind of how I knew that I loved it. Like after going through so many other experiences, it just really confirmed to me how much I enjoy getting to it really stimulates my brain in the right way, if that's a good way to say. Like it makes me excited to work on it. It makes me excited to get up in the morning. I get excited about my school projects. I think that's like my personal experience with it.
That's great. So when you say it stimulates your brain in the right way, like what do you mean? Like
So
what
I would
what is that, like what gets you excited about a project?
like I would say I'm a very fast learner and I like to be good at what I'm doing. I have a little bit of perfectionist tendencies. But when I would work, I would always try to, strive above and beyond. But after a certain point, you kind of hit a wall where like it gets repetitive and it gets boring. Like once you're good at it, but you're not seeing any results from it. Like there was no room for growth. Um, but with design, like I enjoy the research, the process of having to find inspiration, having to sketch out your comps, proofing, like through printing, checking colors, checking typography, checking the layout and hierarchy of things, just really getting to think creatively while also, like we were saying before, making sure that the form follows the function, making sure you're communicating a message. Like I don't really know how to describe it well, but just the way that my brain has to interact with these projects and the work that is involved in graphic design, like it makes me feel fulfilled.
That's great. It sounds like you're doing a lot of puzzle solving.
I would say, yeah, in a way. Like sometimes you get a client brief like through project work and you have to kind of figure out how to make all the pieces fit together. So yeah, in a way.
Okay. So what about you, Manuel? What do you love about graphic design?
That's for me. There's a lot that I like enjoy with graphic design, and I myself don't really consider myself as much of a designer as I used to be. I'm geared towards web development, but
Well, and I can adjust my
yeah,
question,
yeah, no,
right?
but
Like what do you love about what I suppose you're discipline focused because
yeah, yeah.
you graphic design, but then you're primarily looking at web design.
Yeah. So when it comes to all of this, like the real thing that like excites me about it is more of when I have a challenge where I have to like find a unique solution for it, and I don't know, just building out a product. For example, like I've built out a few websites either for myself or for my client, or other like volunteer stuff I've done where there was like unique constraints that I needed to get past, so I had to come up with a unique solution because of those constraints. And there's something about just being able to go above whatever's like stopping me at initially and learning from it. It's what really like gets me excited about it. So whenever there's an opportunity to learn something when I'm working on graphic design or web development, UI design, any of that, that's really when I'm like all in on it, like excited to like get this thing out. I don't really know how to describe it any better than that, but
So it sounds like you also love the troubleshooting part of it.
yeah.
So why web design and not construction or filmmaking or mathematics?
Well, construction, that's not something I've ever really been interested in. Filmmaking, though, I have done before, but not really like an official level here at the college as a student. It was more like two classes I took years ago, but that's still something that it scratches the same like creative itch,
Okay.
where you like make a plan through, instead of like sketching out wireframes. In my case, for web design, it would be making I forget what they're called. Uh, Pretty much you like draw
Like a
each
storyboard?
storyboard. There you go. So you're making a storyboard for what you're gonna film, and like planning out each shot before you actually go to filming. I found that enjoyable too.
Okay.
I think for me, as one of the other things is just seeing the end product after spending X amount of time on something, going back and seeing it like used, especially like every year, for the arts department, we have the student jury show, and I'm tasked with making the website to host all the and showcase all the interactive works or multimedia works.
Oh, great.
So I'm just like there, I'm working like the shift there, but I see people like just scrolling through the screen and like clicking on things. I'm like, oh great, that's actually working. That's good to see. Or if I see someone like struggling with something, it's like, oh no, let me make a quick fix and just put it back in there. The first time I had to do it, I completely missed out someone's name and like their project. So I had to like run to the lab real quick, get my laptop, and upload it, because it was like already like we were having the opening night, so everyone was like looking at it, and I just needed to make sure that was there. So I mean, doing things like that, just like quick fixes, or I don't know. When I see people interact with things, it's actually like fun too.
That's great. So you really enjoy crafting the audience experience.
In a way, yeah.
So how would you phrase it? If audience experience isn't what you would say.
I really don't know how to write
Okay.
it. But yeah, I don't know. It's just because like someone that does web design or UI design, it's really user interaction.
Okay. So
So
user experience, perhaps.
yeah, it's like UI UX, so user experience, and just seeing it live when someone's doing it, it's like, oh okay, so they're not interacting with this the way I thought they would. Maybe I could tweak that so it works the way they thought it should initially.
Okay. That's great. So what about you, Alex? I think you had something you wanted to say.
Oh, I was just gonna like add on to what Manuel said about learning new things makes it exciting.
Oh
It was
yeah?
like I love getting to like teach myself something that I wanted to learn. If there was like if I had time, I would like to start getting into motion design. But for me, like things like logos, learning how to manipulate type, that was all stuff that I started focusing heavily on this semester. I really wanted to make sure that my logos were better. Because I mean, you think you're great and everything, but like I wanted to get to the inspiration that I have, and I'm still not there, but I think that a lot of it is pushing ourselves into doing bigger and better things as we go through the degree and like bringing yourself up to speed with where the industry is to kind of get yourself in. But I also like what he said about the user experience. I think there's a lot of technical aspects to it, like how we were talking about fine art. What's the difference? Like there's more technical in terms of like literally technology and software troubleshooting that you have to figure out with design. And when I was doing interactive, I did enjoy coding, but I'm not very good at it. Like, uh, I had so much fun learning HTML and CSS, and then when I made my website, it just did not turn out how the comps that I made, like I designed, were. And I was like, oh, all right. So I understand in a way, but he is a lot more advanced like than I am. I stopped in like 2020.
So you are not really working on the web design portion.
Yeah, I was doing both. Like I was gonna get both of the specializations. And then because of the pandemic, stopped taking those classes. And I thought, if anything, I'll go back and complete the degree later, but after I graduate.
Got it. So let's take this moment to talk about like what is the program here at Valencia. So we have a graphic design program, and we know that there's you can choose your specializations. We know that it's an AS program, so it's an Associate of Science. And for those of you listening who may not know the difference between AA and AS, an Associate of Science degree is crafted so that you get the tools that you need to work immediately. And so it's not really about while you potentially could with if you take extra classes, the AS degree is not geared towards transferring to a larger university like UCF or UF or one of those. It's geared towards you finish your credits, which is about how many credits are in an AS program?
It's the same 64 about.
Okay, so there's about 64 credits, and you take those and you are able to work and get a job in your field immediately upon graduation. So it's a little bit of a shorter time commitment, fewer credits than you would for a 4-year degree, focused on working. Whereas an Associate of the Arts, an AA degree, is geared directly towards transferring to UCF or a larger university. So you guys are both in the AS program. And so tell me a little bit about it. So we've got 2 specializations. What are they?
We have the graphic design, which is print design, and then we have interactive, which is UI UX, which is the web design. I mean, UI UX doesn't only go around web design; it's just usually what we're gearing when we learn it in the program. I can talk more towards the interactive side of it because that's my major. With it, there's some courses between the 2 sides that are the same. Like the majority of them are the same. There's I think 4 courses difference between the 2.
Okay.
That are more focused in the specialty. With the graphic design program, we have pretty much the whole program. We have graphic design classes, and then there's a few general classes we need to take that's similar to how you would in an AA. But in this case, since we are trying to gear towards getting ready for a career in graphic design or web development or web design or anything like that, we're gearing towards that. So with the interactive, it's a lot of like working with design tools geared towards UI. So we have like Figma, and then we will create a design and prototype it into a functional prototype where we can give it to someone, they can like actually interact with it and things will happen. Similar to how it will look when you code it out. So with UI design, you have both learning how to design for UI, like learning how to design UIs, but also learning how to develop it using web technology such as HTML and CSS.
Okay, so you're learning web design technologies, HTML, CSS. You're learning how to craft a user experience.
Yeah.
You're learning how to assess whether the user experience worked the way you thought it would.
Yeah. And then there's there's the user testing aspect of it, and also just a lot of research and seeing how certain users will interact with something. So we create this things called personas, where we would give them a name, give them an age, and when we're designing these things, we're designing, it's like, is this something we think that John will be like doing, or Bob, or whatever name we gave them? Is this something that they would actually like to do? No, let's rethink this. And that's really like, we start our personas by looking at our target market. So we base it off of the target market and then design towards that.
That's great. So this is very client based, and it's
Yeah.
also very target audience based.
Yeah.
That's great. And so what about, Alex, do you want to talk a little bit more about the other track?
Sure.
So what is the other track called?
The print specialization.
Ooh.
So he's talking about interactive. I'm talking about print. It kind of it spans a broad variety of things. Anything that would be designed and printed, we learn a lot about like color modes. So with interactive design, it most likely won't be printed, so they are able to work in RGB. But when you have to work thinking of we're using a printer, you have to work in CMYK. You have to consider things like when you're designing something, you have to think about the bleeds. Like, is this color or image going to run off the page? Thinking about, let's see, like the even just interactivity of someone seeing it from a close distance, a medium distance, and then a far viewing distance. So things like that can be involved. I would say we do like posters, we do layout design in books, newsletters. Trying to think of what else. We do logo design, branding. That obviously is involved with the interactive side as well. Like Manuel was saying, we have classes that overlap. So, like the foundational courses of like, here's the software. This is how you use it. But I don't know. I maybe don't have the best like knowledge of how to describe the program to someone else, but I think a lot of it is just learning how to be a production designer if you were to work in-house somewhere. So, we do utilize research, but I would say not as heavily as the interactive design side. Like I've made personas, and I know like in the field, there's something called case studies, and it's somewhat similar to like personas and end user testing. Like you would do surveys and things like that to kind of see what people are interested in around your like competitors and target market and things like that. It's not as heavily, I mean, maybe things have changed since I've taken the beginning courses, but I would say it's not as heavily referenced in the print design side. But we do have more specialized courses like publication design, where you learn how to create a magazine and everything that goes into that. We have layout design, where I know when I took it, we did like a brand style guide, which is something that you may see when you work in-house somewhere. We did like out of home campaigns, which means like billboards and large format. I'm trying to think of what other specialized courses we have that are only on the print side. I wish I had the flow chart in front of me, but I don't. But I don't know, maybe Manuel could save me here. I can't remember all of the print specialized courses, but there is a lot of overlap.
Yeah, there is a lot of overlap. I can't really speak to what the courses are because I don't have them like memorized off the back of my head. But
right.
Yeah, with what you were saying about I lost my train of thought.
Well, that's okay. So what is, because there's a lot of classes. It sounds like there's a lot of opportunity to follow what you would like to focus on. It sounds like even though there are these two tracks, you really get a chance to focus on what you want to learn.
Yeah, I that's something that is like emphasized with having two different tracks, and
that's great. Yeah, it is emphasized by two different tracks. That's great. And what I loved hearing you talk about was the different levels of research. Yeah. So when you're talking about research, it sounds like you're talking about client research or target audience research or Or what else?
We with research we look at target audience, age groups, where you're like based off of, like where you live, like cultural demographics and things like that. But
Socioeconomic status as well.
that too.
Looking at competitors, like who would be the competitor of this
Yeah.
brand that you're representing.
Does something similar to this brand exist, and how is what you're creating different, and how can you brand it in a way that it's not just looking like you're copying off of a different brand. um Actually, that reminded me what I wanted to point out, with interactive design, just because we're working on like web projects usually or mobile applications, it doesn't mean that we're not doing any branding, because there are some classes that are heavily like creating a you start by creating a brand, and then you work your way up to making like a full functioning website following that same brand that you created initially. So you'll create all those brand assets and then reuse them in different aspects.
That's great.
Yeah, I have
So,
to say some of my.
yeah.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say some of my most fun logos were through those brands that we had to create ourselves in interactive classes.
Yeah. Now, something else that Alex, you mentioned earlier, was being interested in doing like motion graphics eventually. Um, with logo design, that's something that I used to enjoy doing, was seeing how the logo should move and then try to create it, like create that motion with After Effects to animate it in a certain way. I don't do that as much anymore, but that was something that was like I used to find like really fun to do. And we actually do have a course that teaches that in the program. It's one of the select topics in graphic design, so it's an elective. I believe it's just called motion graphics, but we do have like lots of electives that are geared towards like more personal interests that might not be covered in the core classes in the program. So like I mentioned that initially I wanted to be a photographer, so I took photography actually for my elective here at the graphic design program, and actually got to learn a lot of skills with photography finally at that point. So like for me, it was a full circle moment. It's like, this is what I initially wanted to do. I'm finally learning a little bit about it, but it's no longer what I want to do, but I still enjoy it. So yeah.
Oh, and it still adds in
Yeah, it adds in because
to your skill set and the tools that you have to offer.
yeah, because like whenever I'm working on like, for me, websites, whenever I'm working on one, there's sometimes where I'm like, oh, I need like this very specific thing, but I can't find it anywhere. If it's a photo, I can just go to an area and take those pictures and use it on the website. If it's, I need like a specific icon, I can just make it myself. Iconography was something that pretty much for every web project I had, I created my own icons, and instead of using like pre-made ones.
Yeah.
Which I think added a little bit to the uniqueness of what I was making at the time. I don't create my own icons as much, but whenever I do need to, I can just do it, and I don't have to buy it off of like someone else for a large amount of money. It's just like, oh yeah, I can just make an icon and it's fine.
That's great. It lets you be a little bit more independent.
Yeah, and gives me a little bit of versatility.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you guys, because the AS degree is geared towards helping you work. So what do you learn about the business of graphic design in this program?
Yeah, so with every project that we have, we pretty much go through a creative brief. Like we get some type of thing.
So what is a creative brief?
Yeah. So they would tell us what they want for the project, and then we have to go in and say, okay, so what are the goals of the client? What is it that defines success for the client, and then also separating the client, like the person that you are actually like your point of contact. What are the goals for the business, and what are the goals? Like, how does success look like for this business? Why is it that you're designing or redesigning something from this business? And then from there, that's when we start doing the research, looking at inspiration, things that exist, maybe not exactly geared towards what we're doing, because you don't really want to like search up inspiration for, let's say if I'm making I'm designing the brand for, or not the brand, the label for a new energy drink or something. I don't want to look at other energy drinks because that's where you might end up making the same thing that already exists if an existing energy drink, and that could lead to accidental copyright issues. But looking at different aspects, like sometimes looking at nature or looking at things that already exist in the world that aren't necessarily what you're trying to design for, is like something that we'll do. And we have this thing called process books that we pretty much put it all in there as we're working on it, finding inspiration. We put it in there. We describe what inspired us from it, and then from there we also do the things I mentioned, which is like the personas um, or sketches. We have to do tons of sketches.
So you really learn how to take a
Yeah.
project from client ask all the way to finished product.
Yeah. So it's like you said, from like what was asked for to then.
So then you've
For-
got the client request, which often involves interpretation, right?
Yeah.
Do people always ask for what they really want?
From my experience doing freelance work, there's some who have an idea in their head of what they want, but it's not exactly what they want. Like you can make it one to what they were saying, and then once they see it, it's like, yeah, that's not what I wanted.
Right.
That doesn't look as good as I thought it would look, and then you have to go back to the research phase, or if you had other sketches that were away from what they initially wanted, you could revisit it. That's why another reason why we do a ton of sketches. But in the context of our classes, we pretty much were given the initial ask, and then every single week, or not every other week, we give a check-in update with the professor who is playing the role of a client, showing them what we have, and usually they'll say, okay, I like this direction, this is what I want you to focus on, and then we'll continue working from that direction. A lot of times it's not the one that you really liked, and you have to learn how to work with the one that you don't, because it's what the client wants. So
Yeah, and that sometimes is a difference between being an independent fine artist and working towards graphic design. And it sounds like you're actually learning how to work with clients as much as you are learning the craft of crafting a creative communication tool.
yeah, and I think like even when you're working at a company that you're not working freelance, but you're working full time on a company, those companies have clients that you might be designing for. So, and even on the aspect outside of freelancing, like you still need to know how to communicate with a client. And
That's great. And Alex, it sounds like you
wanted
you
to
have something
touch
to
on,
add.
Yeah, I was like, I wanted to touch on like part of what we learn about the industry slash the business, like with the process books, is I feel like we get both the experience of someone who is being a freelancer and presenting to the client, as well as an in-house designer, because we'll get projects where, we get the client brief. We get, okay, this is who they are, this is the mission, this is their target audience, this is what they're aiming for. So create something for that. Or you get to choose what business you want to create a conceptual redesign for. Now tell me why you chose to do this. So, you get the experience of, okay, here's an existing brand. I have to take their brand image. I have to explain why I'm making the choices that I am, why I'm, making the changes that I am, and why this contributes to their overall mission and goal for this project. So, particularly, I think about layout design when we did the brand style guide redesign. Like, you take when you join a team as a designer, and this is the brand, you must follow these rules. You're not allowed to change them. Like you have to think about those things. Or, hey, I'm a freelancer and I have to explain to my client why I decided to make this purple. Because not because purple's a pretty color, it's because purple is the color of royalty. And, we want to show the exclusivity of your brand. You have to have a reason for everything that you're doing. And I feel like we get a lot of that. We have to be able to justify our choices. When we're presenting the process book, we have to talk about typography. We have to show the process that we got to before we even got to the final. And we have to show, like, here are the sketches, here's the inspiration, and this is why I was inspired. This is the thing particularly that I took into this sketch, things like that. So I feel like we get a lot of that experience, and in a way they make you have to build your backbone as a designer, where you have to be able to stand up for yourself and explain why you're making these choices. You don't just get to be like, well, I thought it was cool, you know? So I think that's a cool part of the program.
So you're not just making creative choices, you're basing those creative choices with your research, with creative research. And
Yes.
you're not only making a choice, but you're making sure you build the skill to articulate the rationale for the choice.
Yes. And like even when we go into present our projects at the end of the at the end of the project, when we go to present it, we have to talk about what we did, why we made some of the choices we did, as if we're presenting it to a client, and if it's a classroom full of our classmates. And then from there, we have to know how to take any critiques that we get from it. It's usually constructive. We have to learn how to give constructive feedback as well.
Ooh.
So it's like, oh, I don't like that. It's not good enough. You need to explain why you don't like it and then how they can improve it. Mm-hmm. And then if you can't just say either like, oh, I like those colors you use. It's like you need to go like deeper into that feedback. And then or if you're asking someone why they use those colors, they need to be able to explain why they pick those colors and not just say because they look pretty.
Right. So you're defending your argument, but you're also learning to ask good questions.
Yeah.
And to offer suggestions, not just have an opinion.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's great.
I feel like I've definitely developed my skills in like giving constructive feedback to people. I've always like when we would have in-person classes been the person when they're presenting their sketches or talking about here's my idea. I'll be like, oh, what's this thing and what does that mean? Or what if you did this? Like let's look at this cool idea, that you could build off of. So, you get a lot of different opportunities to kind of develop different skills because some people do go into more management roles like project management, art directing, creative directing. So there are people who maybe don't want to think about those things and just want to produce. Mm-hmm. And maybe there are people who do want to make those creative decisions. And I think sometimes with like group projects that are assigned, you can kind of fall into those roles and see how you work in a team. And I think that that's cool about the program too.
That's great. So it sounds like there is a lot of teamwork in this too.
Yeah.
Like, is this more, do you work more independently or do you work more with groups?
So most of the projects are done independently, but I feel like when it comes to design, it's more of a collaborative thing where even if you're working on your own, you have other people looking at it and giving you feedback along the way. Because a lot of times when you design in isolation, it doesn't always end up being the best product that it could be. One thing that, because I work at the lab, like we mentioned earlier, one of the things that I do when one of the students there asks me for feedback, I just say print it. Yeah. And a lot of times they're like, but why do you want me to print? I'm like, a lot of times it's for print design stuff. So I'm like, let's look at it printed and then we can break this down. And yeah, it's more of like seeing it physically versus on a screen. And I can give them feedback and then they can like go. I've seen a lot of people just like go in after one of those sessions and like improve their design by a ton, and it's like it looks amazing. There was just like tiny little mistakes that needed to be fixed. So when you're working on your own with no one ever looking at it at all, like throughout the process of designing something, a lot of like small things will be missed out,
and then
you get kind of blind.
Yeah.
Got it. So we just have a couple more minutes. So I did want to ask you two things. So the first thing is what you've talked a little bit about a portfolio. So what does that mean when you're talking about a portfolio for your discipline? And is there any way that those portfolios are showcased within the program?
Yeah, so at the end of the program, we have two classes. One of them is portfolio prep, which prepares us in a way where we're like getting all our brand assets. So we're designing a logo for ourselves. We're designing a business card, letterhead if we need a letterhead, and then a few other things. And then also auditing all the work that we've done from the point we started in the program to the point that we were at prep.
Oh, so you're designing your own business card and your
Yeah.
own letterhead for your own personal freelance business.
Or
Oh, wow.
with review, we have the actual portfolios, which if you're a print student, usually will be a book that you design and you put in case studies for all your projects that you audited and decided that you wanted to be in your portfolio and represent what you do.
Okay.
And then for print students as well, you have some form of like web presence. So either like a website through one of those like drag and drops that you have, or if you do also know how to code, you can code out one yourself. For interactive students, it's just a website with everything that you have, and any other like social media presence or online presence that you have, you include as well. The business cards are also required for that, and it's more of like personal branding for when you are networking. You can just hand those out, and then in the program we have like we have a set of interviews that.
Okay, so wait. So first we've got the portfolio.
Yeah, sorry.
And no, this is great. So the portfolio is made up of anything that you would make, which includes class projects and all of the brand experiments that you've done, and it kind of showcases the work and your journey.
So you want to, it does showcase your journey. You want to pick out the best things, like your best works, and also improve upon them so they're ready for your portfolio. And then you also will want to include things that are geared towards what you're going for career-wise.
Okay. And Alex, do you have anything to add to that?
I was going to say also you want to show a variety of things, you know, so not just all logos and branding, you know, because you're going to be wearing a couple different hats usually when you're a designer, and potential employers would like to see the full spectrum of your skills.
And so when you say variety, you talk about logos, but what else would be variety?
Like in my own personal portfolio, I have like publication design stuff. Like I have a magazine, I have logo redesigns, and branding concepts, things like responsive logos, which in a way is somewhat more interactive because you have to think about it being on mobile, web, and print. I'm trying to think of what else. I don't know, just like a wide variety. I think I'm going to include some of my like past web slash interactive work as well, because I've had a review of my portfolio with someone who's in the industry, and they said like, you know, we want to see people who have UI UX experience as well as designers. So you have to think about how to market yourself as a designer and not just be a one-hit wonder, I guess.
Okay, so it sounds like you get to have those conversations in this program.
Yeah. With the last class as well, like with portfolio review, we pretty much like we're meeting every other week, talking with our classmates and our professors. Like this is what I have. This is what I want to include. How can I like fix that? And then we're looking at like different portfolios that already exist and see how they did it, so we can kind of incorporate some aspects of that for ourselves in terms of like layout and other design features.
So there's an entire class that is dedicated to refining your portfolio so that you can find employment once you graduate.
Yeah, so that's that final class as well. It's like it's called portfolio review. So after your portfolio is made, you actually have reviews. You actually get interviews with some volunteered industry professionals who will go through your portfolio and review it and give you feedback on it. So you, and also say like, yeah, I think you're industry ready. So that's part of like what determines whether we graduate as well.
Whether you're industry ready.
50% of your grade in portfolio review is based on those interviews.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we have less than a minute. So what, really quick, what surprised you about this program, or what surprised you about graphic design? Either one.
Alex?
The wide variety of things that encompass the world of design. If there's something that you don't like, there's most likely something out there that you do like about it. Um, and I think for me, the coolest thing, maybe not the most surprising thing, but the coolest thing for me is getting to walk in a supermarket and notice when a brand has done a redesign of their logo. No one else notices those things.
I
Like,
have to agree on that. Like anytime I walk into a supermarket, either I notice a redesign or I say, "Oh wow, that's a really cool like branding for this product." Like, snap a picture and then just like I don't even do anything with it. It's just like I found it really cool to see in person.
So the thing that surprises you most is like walking through the world and really noticing
Yeah,
brand choices.
and how
yeah,
things are incorporated. Yeah.
That's
the
great.
real
So
life application of what we're learning.
just one question, fill in the blank. Creativity is. Crickets.
I'm gonna say anything.
Creativity is anything. I love that. Creativity is. That's okay. What is one thing that you are deeply grateful for right now?
Just being able to have a place to learn and grow as a person.
I love that.
I
Alex,
think my coworkers at the lab and the faculty in the program.
I love that. All right. So thank you so much for joining us today on Embracing the Bold. This is the School of Arts, Entertainment, and Design, and we learned about our graphic design program today, and we talked to two fantastic students who also work for us at Valencia College. And we will see you next time.